Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Oliver. Thanks for joining us. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is defending President Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki last week. Pompeo testified Wednesday before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He told senators presidents are, quote, entitled to have private meetings and would not get into further detail. Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill with more.
Are you 100% confident that you know everything that President Trump discussed with President Putin?
I'm very confident that I received a comprehensive debriefing from President Trump.
Several senators tried.
It's not for me to disclose the contents of those conversations.
But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo would not give them any new details about the president's now infamous meeting with Putin.
Did he tell you whether or not what happened in those 2 hours?
Yes, Senator. The predicate of your question implied some notion that there was something improper about having a one-on-one meeting. I completely disagree.
New Jersey Democrat Bob Menendez wanted to know if the president promised to weaken sanctions.
Senator, the president was very clear with Vladimir Putin about U.S. positions.
And he told you that.
Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions. My questions is to get to the truth. We don't know what the truth is.
And the committee's chair, Republican Bob Corker, said the questions reflect a broader concern.
But it's the president's actions that create tremendous distrust in our nation, among our allies.
Senator, I disagree with most of what you just said there. Every sanction that was put in place was signed off by the President of the United States. Every spy that was removed was directed by the President of the United States. Somehow there's this idea that this administration is free-floating. This is President Trump's administration. Make no mistake, who's fully in charge of this.
Yeah. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, the big question on Capitol Hill was what happened in that Helsinki meeting last week. We've already seen some of this in your piece, but I want to play a little more of that heated exchange between Senator Menendez and Secretary Pompeo. Let's listen to that.
The president was very clear with Vladimir Putin about U.S. positions. They're the U.S. positions that are the Trump administration's positions, and he spoke about them very firmly and clearly when he met with Vladimir Putin.
And he told you that?
Senator, I'm telling you what he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about, and I'm telling you what U.S. policy is today. I understand, Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions. My questions is to get to the truth. We don't know what the truth is. And the only way that we will know what the truth is, what transpired in those 2 hours, in a highly amazing period of time to spend alone, one-on-one, is by understanding at least that if you were briefed by the president, what he told you. I don't think that's unfair to know, to understand what policy is.
Nancy, how are lawmakers reacting to Secretary Pompeo's testimony? Did they think we learned anything new?
No, and we really didn't learn anything new. And Secretary Pompeo was unapologetic about that. He said that the president has every right to a private meeting. He said that this president believes that he can make progress and that if he divulges all the details of what was discussed, perhaps the Russians won't have enough trust in the process. Therefore, some of these details need to be kept private. This was obviously not what many of these senators wanted to hear. They complained that they're learning more from the Kremlin than they are from their own government, and they agree with Pompeo that they can't trust anything that's coming out of the Kremlin. So it was a big disappointment for senators on the left and some on the right who felt that this was their best chance to get concrete details from the Secretary of State, who you heard say has been fully briefed by the President of the United States, but he said he can't give away anything that was told to him in confidence by the President. He didn't come prepared even with a few crumbs to toss out to them to make it look like he was placating them, make it look like he wanted to answer their questions. It was clear that he came prepared to sort of draw a line in the sand, and whether that was a line that the President asked him to draw or not, we simply don't know.
Well, North Korea also came up at the hearing. Senator Ed Markey was blunt in asking Mr. Pompeo if he was concerned that the Trump administration was being taken advantage of by the North Korean regime. Here's what the secretary had to say.
This administration has taken enormously constructive actions that have put us in a place that is far better than in either of the two previous administrations, one Republican, one Democrat. We have put sanctions regime in place that is unequaled. We are continuing to enforce that sanctions regime. We've made incredibly clear that we will continue to enforce that sanctions regime until such time as denuclearization, as we've defined it, is complete. Pressure on the regime is clearly being felt. We have lots of work to do. But unlike previous administrations, Senator, we have no intention of allowing the UN sanctions, the world's sanctions, that we led the charge to have put in place, to allowing those sanctions to either be lifted or not enforced.
Nancy, what concerns lawmakers the most about the administration's handling of North Korea?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the lack of information that they're getting from the administration. You know, Secretary Pompeo said multiple times to the senators in this hearing, fear not. Fear not. We are doing the right thing. We are putting pressure on the North Koreans, and we are making concrete progress in those nuclear talks. But when he was pressed about what exactly that progress is, he declined to provide details. Now, this wouldn't be that distressing for these lawmakers, but they have grown somewhat skeptical of claims made by this administration because they hear so many shifting claims from the president himself, and they worry that what they're being told is not the same as what is actually taking place. That's why you saw so much skepticism. That's why you heard the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in a pretty remarkable exchange with the Secretary of State basically plead with the Secretary to explain why does the president do these things? Why does he say these things that cause both senators on both sides of the aisle and our allies to be nervous about what it is that he thinks and what it is that he wants to get across? The Secretary, somewhat remarkably, said that people shouldn't pay attention to what the president says. What they should pay attention to is U.S. policy, and U.S. policy towards North Korea, towards Russia, hasn't changed. What you heard from several Democrats, though, Mag, is that our allies and our adversaries alike listen to what the president says, and they act accordingly, that you cannot separate the two.
So, Nancy, what are the next steps for lawmakers then? Will they have other chances to learn more about the Helsinki summit?
It doesn't appear that they will. The secretary said that he hadn't spoken and gotten a briefing from the translator, who was the only other American in the room. He said that that is not his typical practice. The translator is there to translate, not to keep a faithful record of everything that was discussed. He says he believes that he got the full story from the President of the United States. And so if he's not interested in sharing those details with the Foreign Relations Committee, it's hard to see where else they could go to get that information. It appears for now that they are going to have to be content with what they've been told by the president himself and, stuff that was backed up today by the Secretary of State.
All right. An interesting day on Capitol Hill, to say the least. Nancy Cordes, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.